Imagine a country that once welcomed over 4 million international tourists every single year. A land where ancient stone streets hummed with the footsteps of pilgrims, backpackers, luxury travelers, historians, honeymooners, and spiritual seekers from every corner of the earth. A destination so layered, so historically rich, so uniquely positioned at the intersection of three of the world's great religions that no travel bucket list felt complete without it. Now imagine that country almost overnight becoming a place the world has collectively decided it no longer wants to visit. Not because the ancient stones disappeared. Not because the history evaporated. Not because the food stopped being extraordinary or the coastline stopped being breathtaking. But because war came. And war, unlike almost any other force on the planet, has the power to erase an entire tourism economy in a matter of weeks, not months, weeks. This is the story of Israel's tourism collapse. And it is one of the most dramatic, economically brutal, and geopolitically layered implosions of a travel industry the modern world has ever witnessed. This is not a story about politics. This is a story about money, fear, perception, and the terrifying speed at which a thriving industry can be reduced to rubble, sometimes even faster than the buildings themselves. Let's begin. Before we understand what collapsed, we have to understand what was there to collapse in the first place. Because this is the part of the story that most people outside never fully appreciated. Israel's tourism industry was not a small niche or regional curiosity. It was a serious, structurally significant, billion-dollar pillar of the national economy. In 2019, the year before the pandemic disrupted global travel, Israel recorded approximately 4.55 million inbound tourists. Those tourists did not come cheaply. The average spend per visitor was extraordinarily high. Among the highest in the Middle East. Hotels in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv routinely commanded rates that rivaled Paris and New York. 5-star properties along the Dead Sea were booked months in advance. The tourism sector as a whole contributed roughly 20 billion new Israeli shekels annually to GDP. Entire ecosystems of businesses, restaurants, archaeological tour operators, religious pilgrimage organizers, luxury spa resorts, boutique hotels in Jaffa's winding alleyways existed entirely because of the constant flow of international visitors. The infrastructure supporting this industry was staggering. Ben Gurion International Airport had been expanding for years. Terminal 3, a modern, high-capacity facility, processed tens of millions of passengers. The hospitality sector employed hundreds of thousands directly, with hundreds of thousands more supported indirectly through retail, transportation, food production, and cultural services. Israel had spent decades building a tourism brand that was, frankly, extraordinary given itself as a place where you could walk where Jesus walked in the morning, float in the Dead Sea at noon, eat world-class hummus in a bustling market by afternoon, and dance on a Tel Aviv rooftop by night. And it worked. Year after year, the numbers grew. The industry adapted. It survived previous conflicts and moments of tension. It absorbed shocks, and kept moving forward. But nobody was prepared for what came next. October 7, 2023 is now firmly written into history as one of the most traumatic days in Israel's modern era. The attacks that day triggered a military response of enormous scale. But for tourism, the critical story was economic. Within 72 hours, cancellations began. Not a trickle. Not a wave. A deluge. Airlines started suspending routes: Delta, United, Lufthansa, Air France, Ryanair, EasyJet. One after another, carriers halted service to Ben Gurion. The reasons varied. Safety concerns, crew refusal, regulatory pressure, but the outcome was identical. The global travel arteries connecting Israel to the world were severed. Hotels that had been fully booked began processing mass cancellations. Tour operators issued refunds, credits, and in many cases faced existential financial collapse as forward bookings vanished overnight. Occupancy rates fell from above 80% to below 10% within weeks. That is not a downturn. That is a cardiac arrest. And just as the industry hoped for stabilization, the situation escalated further. On April 13, 2024, Iran launched a direct large-scale attack on Israel, over 300 drones and missiles. While most were intercepted, the psychological impact was devastating. Because the message to the global travel market was clear. This was no longer a contained regional conflict. This was a direct confrontation involving a major military power. Insurance markets reacted instantly. Travel coverage became prohibitively expensive or unavailable. Airlines pulled back again. Investors froze. Tourism became, in practical terms, uninsurable. And then came the deeper damage, confidence collapse. Not just among tourists, but among Israelis themselves. Surveys throughout 2024 showed a growing number of citizens, especially younger, globally mobile professionals, considering relocation. Israeli passport holders began appearing in cities like Lisbon, Berlin, Toronto, and New York not as tourists, but as potential residents. Real estate softened. Rental vacancies rose in certain segments. Dual citizens activated second passports. This matters enormously. Because tourism does not operate in isolation. It depends on confidence, investor confidence, workforce confidence, national confidence. When that erodes, the system begins to hollow out from within. Investment. Businesses hesitate. Workers leave the sector, or the country entirely. Even without physical destruction, the economic ecosystem begins to decay. By 2024, international arrivals had collapsed by roughly 85 to 90% compared to 2019 levels. From over 4.5 million visitors to somewhere between 300,000 and 500,000. Billions in revenue disappeared. Hotels survived on government support. Tour guides lost livelihoods. Airline connectivity remained severely limited well into 2025. And perhaps most damaging of all, Israel's global tourism brand took a hit that cannot be quickly reversed. Tourism runs on perception. Years of conflict coverage reshaped how the destination is seen globally. Rebuilding that perception will require not months, but years of sustained stability. Meanwhile, competitors benefited. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and even Greece absorbed redirected demand. Travelers didn't stop traveling, they simply chose safer alternatives. And once those new habits form, winning tourists back becomes even harder. The human cost is profound. Unemployed hotel workers. Silent markets in Jerusalem. Empty tour routes in Galilee. Families relocating abroad. Businesses closing quietly. This is what tourism collapse looks like, not just in numbers, but in lives. Can it recover? Yes, but only under one condition. Sustained, credible security stability. History shows recovery is possible. Countries like Bosnia, Rwanda, and Cambodia rebuilt their tourism industries after devastating conflict. But in every case, recovery began only after stability became real, not promised. For Israel, that stability depends on multiple unresolved fronts: Gaza, Hezbollah, Iran, and broader regional tensions. Until those are managed or de-escalated in a durable way, recovery will remain slow, fragile, and vulnerable to reversal. And so we arrive at the deeper paradox. The very forces that make Israel one of the most unique and spiritually powerful destinations on earth are the same forces that make it so difficult to stabilize. Its geography, history, and religious significance are both its greatest strength, and its greatest vulnerability. The tourists still want to come. But right now, risk outweighs desire. And many Israelis themselves are asking the same question travelers are. Is now the right time to stay? For many, the answer is not yet. And that may be the most telling signal of all. Because when both visitors and residents begin stepping back at the same time, what you're witnessing is not just a downturn. It's a full system pause. A nation's tourism economy holding its breath. Waiting. For stability. For confidence. For a future that feels predictable again. The stones of the old city have survived empires, wars, and centuries of upheaval. They will survive this too. But the fragile, human ecosystem built around them is now living through its darkest chapter in modern history. And the road back, if it comes, will be long, uncertain, and far more difficult than most are willing to admit.